They said it couldn't happen. They said the walls were closing in. They said it was over. But on a cold November night in 2024, everything changed. And now, 9 months into 2025, the storm they promised, the storm they warned about, the storm they feared, has arrived, but here's what they're not telling you. This storm isn't what you think it is. While cable news feeds you carefully selected sound bites, while social media influencers read from the same script, while politicians on both sides perform their rehearsed outrage, something else is happening. Something bigger. Something they desperately hope you won't notice until it's too late. In the shadows of power, decisions are being made that will reshape America for generations. Deals are being struck. Alliances are forming. And the old guard, the establishment that's controlled the levers of power for decades, is scrambling, terrified, watching their grip on influence slip away like sand through their fingers. This isn't about left versus right. This isn't about red versus blue. This is about something far more fundamental. Who really controls the direction of this country? And what happens when that control is challenged at the highest levels? Over the next 20 minutes, I'm going to show you what's really happening. Not the sanitized version. Not the partisan spin. The truth, backed by evidence, documents, and patterns that are hiding in plain sight. You'll see connections that will make your jaw drop. You'll learn about secret meetings that changed everything. And you'll understand why powerful people on both sides of the aisle are more terrified right now than they've ever been in their entire careers. By the end of this video, you'll never look at American politics the same way again. The question is, are you ready for the truth? But before we dive in, if you value independent analysis that cuts through the noise and reveals what's really happening, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because this story is just beginning, and you won't want to miss what comes next. Let me take you back to January 20th, 2025, Inauguration Day. While millions watched the ceremony, focused on the speeches and the spectacle, something extraordinary was happening behind the scenes. In the 48 hours surrounding that moment, more than 60 high-level meetings took place, meetings that never made the news, involving people whose names you know but whose real influence you've never understood. These weren't ceremonial gatherings. These were negotiating sessions, war rooms, strategy summits where the blueprint for the next 4 years was being finalized in real time. And the most shocking part? Many of these meetings included people you'd never expect to be in the same room together. Tech billionaires who publicly opposed the administration were there. Media executives who spent years criticizing every move were there. Even certain members of the opposing party, people who built their careers on resistance, were there, sitting at tables, making deals, hedging their bets. Why? Because they all saw something coming. Something that transcended their public positions and their carefully cultivated images. They saw the storm on the horizon, and they were making sure they wouldn't be swept away when it hit. Fast forward to today, September 2025, the storm has made landfall, and the landscape is changing faster than anyone predicted. Let's talk about what's actually happening, piece by piece, revelation by revelation. First, consider the executive actions. In the first 8 months of this administration, there have been more executive orders signed than in the entire first term of the previous administration. But here's what the media isn't emphasizing: the content of these orders. We're not just talking about policy adjustments or bureaucratic reshuffling. We're talking about fundamental restructuring of how federal agencies operate, who they answer to, and what their actual mandates are. Take the recent directives regarding intelligence agencies. On the surface, they're framed as efficiency measures, streamlining operations, cutting redundancy. But read between the lines, better yet, read the actual language buried in subsections and amendments, and you'll see something else entirely. These orders are systematically redistributing power, moving decision-making authority away from career bureaucrats and toward political appointees who serve at the pleasure of the executive. Is this legal? Technically, yes. Most of it operates within existing statutory frameworks. Is it unprecedented? Absolutely. And that's what has the establishment in complete panic mode. Now, let's talk about the judiciary. This is where things get really interesting, and it's where the long-term impact of the storm becomes undeniable. By the end of September 2025, this administration has appointed more federal judges in 9 months than most administrations appoint in 2 years. Circuit courts, district courts, specialized courts, the pace is staggering. But it's not just the quantity. It's the profile of these appointees. We're seeing young judges, many in their 30s and early 40s, who will sit on these benches for decades. We're seeing judges with very specific ideological commitments about executive power, about federal versus state authority, about the administrative state itself. This isn't random. This is strategic placement of legal minds who will shape American jurisprudence for the next 30 to 40 years. The implications are staggering. Every major policy fight, every constitutional question, every challenge to executive authority, all of it will eventually wind up before judges who are being confirmed right now. While the media focuses on daily drama and Twitter controversies, let's shift gears and talk about the economy. Because this is where the average American feels the impact most directly. And it's where the narrative you're being fed is most misleading. You're hearing about stock market records. You're hearing about GDP growth. You're hearing carefully selected statistics that paint whatever picture serves the agenda of whoever's speaking. But dig into the actual data, the employment numbers, the real inflation-adjusted wages, the small business formation rates, the manufacturing indices, and you'll see something far more complex and far more concerning. There's a massive wealth transfer happening right now. Not the kind that makes headlines. Not the kind that politicians campaign on. A quiet, systematic shift that's restructuring the American economy in ways that won't be fully understood for years. Consider the regulatory rollbacks in the financial sector. They're being sold as removing burdensome red tape, unleashing economic growth, letting the free market work its magic. But here's what they're actually doing. They're removing safeguards that were put in place after the 2008 financial crisis. They're allowing leverage ratios that even Wall Street veterans find alarming. They're creating conditions that historically, and I mean historically, as in we can look at centuries of economic data, precede major financial instabilities. Now, does that mean a crash is coming tomorrow? No. Economics doesn't work on that timeline. But it means the foundations are being laid for something potentially catastrophic down the road. And when it happens, the people making these decisions right now will be insulated. They'll be protected. Meanwhile, average Americans will bear the consequences, just like they did in 2008, just like they did in 2001, just like they have in every economic downturn in modern history. But here's the twist that nobody's talking about. Some of this is intentional. Not the crash itself, nobody actually wants that, but the volatility, the uncertainty, the creative destruction. Because in chaos, there's opportunity. In disruption, there's the chance to reshape systems. And the people who understand this, who have the resources and the connections to navigate turbulent waters, are positioning themselves to benefit enormously from whatever comes next. Let's talk about foreign policy. Because this is where the storm metaphor becomes almost literal. The entire global order that's existed since the end of World War II is being questioned, challenged, and in some cases actively dismantled. Alliances that seem permanent are suddenly conditional. International agreements that took decades to negotiate are being torn up with the stroke of a pen. Traditional adversaries are being courted with unsettling enthusiasm, while traditional allies are being treated with suspicion and contempt. Is there a strategy here? Yes. Is it the strategy we're being told about? Absolutely not. Behind the public statements and the inflammatory tweets and the provocative press conferences, there's a coherent worldview at work. It's not the worldview of traditional conservatism or traditional liberalism. It's something else, a transactional, zero-sum vision of international relations where loyalty is purchased rather than earned, where agreements are temporary arrangements rather than binding commitments, where power is the only currency that matters. This approach has consequences. We're seeing them play out right now. Old alliances are fraying. New partnerships are forming in unexpected places. The global balance of power is shifting in ways that will define the 21st century. And here's the kicker. Most Americans have no idea it's happening, because the media is too busy covering the spectacle to analyze the substance. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, the opposition. Where are they? What are they doing? Why does their response seem so ineffective, so scattered, so performative? Here's the uncomfortable truth. They're not sure what to do. The traditional playbook doesn't work anymore. The old strategies, the media campaigns, the fact-checking, the appeals to norms and procedures, none of it seems to land. It's like watching someone try to win a boxing match by citing the rules while their opponent is already in the ring. Swinging. But there's something deeper happening here. Something that reveals why the storm is so effective. The opposition isn't just fighting against one person or one administration. They're fighting against a wholesale rejection of the entire system they represent. And that's terrifying for them, because they don't know how to counter it. They don't know how to defend a system that millions of Americans have decided is broken, corrupt, and designed to serve everyone except them. So what do? They double down on the very rhetoric and tactics that alienated those voters in the first place. They lecture about democracy while operating in ways that feel profoundly undemocratic. They talk about representing the people while surrounding themselves with donors, consultants, and elites who have no connection to the lived experiences of average Americans. And the result? The storm grows stronger. The disconnect deepens. The divide becomes unbridgeable. Here's where things get really controversial, and I need you to hear me clearly. I'm not endorsing any of this. I'm not celebrating it. I'm analyzing it, showing you what's actually happening beneath the surface. Because understanding reality, even uncomfortable reality, is always better than clinging to comfortable illusions. The truth is, we're watching a stress test of American democracy in real time. Every institution, every norm, every assumption about how the system works is being challenged. And some of those institutions are holding. Some of those norms are proving resilient. But others are crumbling, revealing themselves to have been far more fragile than anyone realized. The courts are being tested. The media is being tested. The intelligence community is being tested. Congress is being tested. And in each case, we're discovering where the real power lies, where the actual guardrails are, and where we've simply been operating on tradition and good faith rather than enforceable structures. This is the storm. Not just the surface-level chaos and controversy that dominates every news cycle, but the deep, structural transformation of how power operates in America. And it's happening whether we acknowledge it or not, whether we approve of it or not, whether we're prepared for it or not. Let me give you a specific example that illustrates the scope of what we're dealing with. In July 2025, a relatively obscure executive order was signed regarding federal data collection and privacy standards. It got maybe a day of coverage, mostly buried in the back sections of major newspapers. Mentioned briefly on cable news before they moved on to the latest. scandal, or controversy, but that order fundamentally altered how government agencies collect, store, and share information about American citizens. It removed restrictions that had been in place for decades. It created new frameworks for data sharing between agencies. And it opened the door for public-private partnerships in data management that blur the lines between government surveillance and corporate data collection. Why does this matter? Because in the 21st century, data is power. Whoever controls information controls outcomes. And we just drastically changed who has access to what information about whom. The implications for privacy, for civil liberties, for the relationship between citizens and their government, they're profound. But because it wasn't packaged as a dramatic confrontation, because it didn't fit into the ongoing narrative of resistance and controversy, it barely registered in public consciousness. That's the storm. Not just the thunder and lightning that everyone watches, but the rising water that most people don't notice until it's too late. Now, let's talk about what comes next, because this is where analysis becomes projection, where observed patterns point toward potential futures. If current trajectories continue, and there's every indication they will, we're heading toward a fundamental realignment of American politics. Not just in terms of which party controls what, but in terms of what politics even means, what it's for, who participates in it, and how it relates to the actual lives of citizens. The old categories are breaking down. Left and right, liberal and conservative, Democrat and Republican. These labels increasingly fail to capture the actual divisions that matter. The real divides are different. Insider versus outsider, credentialed versus experienced, global versus local, abstract versus concrete. And the storm is accelerating this breakdown, forcing everyone to choose sides in conflicts that don't fit into traditional frameworks. This creates opportunities for some and crises for others. It rewards adaptability and punishes rigidity. It favors those who can navigate chaos and leaves behind those who need stability. Where does this end? Honestly, nobody knows. We're in uncharted territory. The best historical parallels are moments of realignment in American history. The 1890s, the 1930s, the 1960s, periods when the entire political landscape shifted, when new coalitions formed, when the terms of debate fundamentally changed. But we're also in a unique moment, because the pace of change is faster than ever before. The tools available to those wielding power are more sophisticated than ever before, and the global context is more complex than ever before. So historical parallels can only take us so far. What I can tell you is this: the storm isn't passing. It's not a temporary disruption that will soon give way to a return to normalcy. This is the new normal, at least for the foreseeable future. Constant disruption, perpetual crisis, systematic challenge to every established institution and assumption. How should you respond? That depends on who you are, what you value, and what you're trying to protect or achieve. But whatever you do it with clear eyes. Don't let anyone tell you this is normal. Don't let anyone convince you it's not really happening. Don't retreat into comfortable narratives that make you feel better but leave you unprepared for reality. The storm is here. It's real. It's transformative. And it's going to reshape America in ways we're only beginning to understand. The question isn't whether it's coming. It's already arrived. The question is what kind of country emerges on the other side, and what role you're going to play in shaping that outcome. Because here's the final truth, the one that both terrifies and empowers. None of this is inevitable. The trajectory can be altered. The outcomes can be influenced. The future is still being written. But only if enough people wake up to what's actually happening, move beyond the surface level drama, and engage with the deeper transformation that's underway. That's the real story. That's what they don't want you to understand. That's the truth hiding behind the spectacle, beneath the controversy, beyond the headlines. The Trump storm isn't just about one person or one administration. It's about a moment in American history when everything is up for grabs, when the old order is crumbling, and when the new order hasn't yet been determined. What comes next is up to us. All of us. But first, we have to see clearly. We have to understand what's really happening. And we have to be willing to face uncomfortable truths rather than retreating into comforting illusions. The storm is here. The only question is, are you ready? Thanks for watching. If this opened your eyes to something you hadn't considered, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear this. Subscribe for more deep dives into the stories that actually matter. And drop a comment below. I want to know what you think. What did I miss? What am I wrong about? What should I cover next? The conversation doesn't end here. It's just beginning.